With Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 9 done in the books, we got a lot to take in, and we got to take a line from Doctor Strange from Infinity War and say that things just got out of hand because there's a lot to unpack here in this chapter, from a brand new Nine Tails being revealed inside of Himawari, Boruto being confirmed to be afraid to use his Karma Seal, and a battle in Konoha that is changing the landscape as it drags on. So Chapter 9 picks up where the last one left off, immediately keeping his foot on the gas. In the last chapter, we had that mega cliffhanger of Himawari staring down Jura and Hidari, and Jura looking at Himawari, completely confused as to why he could sense Biju chakra inside of her. And this chapter continues to face off with Jura taking particular interest in her, staring daggers at Himawari, and this ultimately leads to Inojin protectively placing his hand between Himawari and Jura to serve as a protective barrier between them, because Himawari, despite being on what looks like an open battlefield, is completely unprepared for what's in front of her, and Shikadai sees right away that things are not going to go easily, and his mind is racing 1,000 miles per minute as he assesses the situation. This ultimately helps the story in a few ways if we're being honest here. It shows us that for all the combat training that Himawari's done over the last 3 years, none of that training really matters when you come face to face with the real thing. In situations like this where life throws you an unexpected curveball, when you least expect it, you either swing and you hit or you strike out. There are just some moments that no amount of preparation can get you ready for. With Himawari, we see something interesting that goes back to what the Boruto Kages were trying to tell Naruto back in the anime in episode 24. Whereas Naruto was pretty certain that the new generation had multiple young shinobi who would surpass all the 5 Kage gathered at the table with Naruto, his Kage peers, they were skeptical because the new generation, they've grown up in a different era. In short, due to no fault of their own, they're spoiled. For this new generation, training exercises like Naruto played with Boruto and Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage in the Scarlet Spring, where Naruto trained Boruto using shadow clones, those were simply games to them. And with Naruto's era, they were training because they didn't have a choice. They were in open cold warfare with the other nations. They were training for missions where they might not come home from. In this era now, things have gotten very peaceful in the ninja world, where being a ninja is elective. Once they reach a certain point at the academy, they either choose to become shinobi or they go into general studies to be a normal civilian, which is what most people do. And the ones who do become ninjas, they don't have a ton of missions to choose from, to the point that A-rank missions that used to be for Jonin, they can be cleared by tuning and super skilled gaining like the members of Boruto's Team 7. Himawari freezing up here, that is a byproduct of the times. She doesn't know what to do in the situation despite her training for the situation. Her mind might know what to do, but her body isn't reacting at the same speed as her mind potentially is, as she's being stared down under the gaze of an apex predator like Jura. Shikadai knows for a fact that they are no match for the duo of Hidari and Jura, and you can see the reality setting in. Whatever they thought they were going to be able to do against what they assumed were Boruto and Sasuke, they're not going to be able to do anything against the two Shinju in front of them. All that training for the last 3 years, it might have just come up short, but when forced into a situation like this, you either go out in a blaze of glory or you run like a coward. Shikadai, despite being on edge and clearly trying to buy time, is still a bit shaky, and this much is evident by Jura just casually producing a book from the cloak that he has, of that claw mark cloak on his shoulders, and we literally see the guy so unserious that he's flipping through pages of his book. A nice callback to how Killer B was writing down lyrics from his debut album Views from the Clouds while he was fighting Sasuke and Team Taka, because he knew he could strike them down at any moment. He wasn't bothered. Jura tells him as much, saying that he doesn't have any interest in the members of Team 10. The only one he's there for is Himawari, and somewhere Naruto is floating around in Kawaki's dimension, unaware that the genetics he gave to Himawari, they carry a hidden curse. Naruto Volume 53 revealed that the Cloud Ninja tried to capture Kushina, the Akatsuki tried to capture Naruto. We learned during the Naruto versus Neji fight that Hinata was captured by the Cloud Village, and her sister Hanabi was eventually captured by Toneri, and now Himawari is being hunted down by Jura. Jura doesn't give the members of Team 10 a chance to prepare any formations that they might have been practicing the last 3 years. With the blink of an eye, he catches them off guard by using wood release that shoots up out the ground, and he's intending to capture Himawari the same way he tried to capture Kawaki last chapter. Now, this is where we do have to give some credit to Team 10. Longtime viewers of the channel, you know that I've been pretty harsh on Team 10. I've given them their flowers before, but but I've been pretty brutal in the past as well, in particular when it comes to them getting caught off guard. Like the way that Amato, someone who isn't even a shinobi, was able to use deception to take them down using ninja tools and calculated bluffs like that bomb he placed on Shikadai's neck. Well, right here we see Team 10, they're very sharp in their response. Shikadai sees what's going on and immediately uses the shadow sewing jutsu to wrap around the tree that is attempting to trap Himawari and slow down its progression by pulling against the trunk and its limbs, which for Shikadai, that's an impressive feat if we're being honest here. We've seen a variation of the shadow sewing jutsu used in filler by Shikamaru against stronger enemies, and it didn't do much, and we saw him use the same jutsu against Hidan in Naruto chapter 283, but eventually Hidan broke out of the jutsu. So what we're seeing here from Shikadai is actually impressive. Now Inojin, he does live up to his words from the last chapter and uses the Super Beast scroll jutsu to produce a frog that manages to rip Himawari out the tree just as it begins to fully capture her, and it flings her to Chocho, who leaps forward and catches her before she falls and hurts herself. While we see Jura is less than pleased with these developments, it's worth noting that Team 10, at the very least, they make the correct call, which is they know they need to escape because the enemy in front of them is too powerful to take on as they are now and without proper backup. And that, my friends, is a sign of growth. It is a sign that at the very least, in terms of battle decision-making decisions, they're already at a tuning level, because part of leadership is knowing when to retreat and not continue fighting a losing battle when you're at a clear disadvantage. However, there's a problem with all of this. Shikamaru basically gets made aware of what's going on with Shikadai, and he has to make a very, very brutal decision, which is that he can't tell his son to run away. He's got to think as a Hokage and not as a father, because he's made aware of the fact that Jura is of the belief that the Nine Tails is in the village. He's been asking for Naruto's location, and for whatever reason, he can sense Himawari has the Nine Tails chakra, and this throws Shikamaru for a loop because Kurama's been dead for 3 years. And this is one moment that I don't think will get appreciated enough by fans, so I'm going to give Shikamaru his flowers here. What we're seeing here is that Shikamaru is able to do the one thing that Naruto couldn't do in Boruto Naruto Next Generations, to the point that it was literally the core part of his character arc, which is the balance of being Hokage and father. Naruto, when push came to shove, he was never truly able to set aside his personal feelings and his responsibilities as a father for his greater responsibilities as a Hokage, as a leader of a whole village of people, and the second most important person in the entire nation of the Land of Fire, behind only the feudal lord Madoka Ikkyo. From as far back as Naruto's 5 Kage summit, we saw that Naruto would struggle with this very task when Gar and everyone basically said, hey, Sasuke, he's gone too far. And Gar even tells him, hey, you want to be Hokage, you got to make decisions like this. And when you fast forward to episode 222 of the anime, Gar is the one telling Naruto that he's got to kill Boruto before he becomes a threat, and Naruto had that panic attack on top of the Hokage monument holding Boruto. Well, here's the thing, Shikamaru, he isn't just talking the talk that he told Naruto after Boruto's killed by Kawaki in chapter 67, where he says that Naruto's duty as Hokage called for him to mourn Boruto later, respect Boruto's decision as a shinobi to die, and to assist Kawaki in killing Code. Shikamaru in this moment, he's walking the very talk that he told Naruto. He puts aside his own feelings as a father, and he wears his Hokage cap proud, which is something you gotta believe is very painful for him to do, because Shikadai is his only son. He's basically accepted the fact that his child's a Konoha shinobi, his child's gotta stand on business. He knows his child's gotta sit there and protect his village. Those are intruders that came into their home that are coming after their comrade, and his child's gotta stand on business no matter how dangerous it is. Now, this is where things get super interesting in my opinion. So Amato, he's watching this whole scene with Kawaki, and he sees Kawaki knocked unconscious, something that seems to be a reoccurring theme with Kawaki throughout part 2 of the series, and he immediately begins to work on his end to try to revive Kawaki. And what's interesting about this is the concern on Amato's face, and it's moments like this that really put into perspective for you how much Amato has riding on Kawaki. He can't afford to lose the guy at all, because the Chroma Seal Kawaki carries contains the genetic data of his daughter, who Amato wants to revive, so Amato doesn't hesitate to remotely revive Kawaki by using ninja tech. We then shift over to Kashin Koji and Boruto in what appears to be Orochimaru's hideout, which the dead giveaway being it literally looks like the exact same hideout that Naruto and Sasuke visited in Naruto Gaiden, though there are a few aesthetic changes since that was drawn by the Naruto series creator Masashi Kishimoto, and and Boruto 2 Blue Vortex is drawn by Kishimoto's assistant Mikio Ikimoto. But the giveaway that you see here is there's a snake on the wall right behind Kashin Koji. Kashin Koji and Boruto, as they're discussing the developments, it's worth noting that as Kashin Koji tells Boruto that Jura and Hidari are on the move now, Boruto is looking down at his karma seal with a troubled look on his face, and somewhere Momoshiki fans are starting down the countdown timer because it shows that Boruto's still worried about his karma seal, and our boy Momoshiki is licking his lips thinking about hijacking the body of Boruto, who has now become so strong and base that he literally scales above Jigen. But before Boruto can get too lost in his own thoughts, he's got to move because he learns that his sister Himawari is in danger and that Konoha shinobi have already been killed. He learns about the Konoha shinobi from Kashin Koji, and he learns about his sister Himawari once he gets back into the village. But in each instance, he's been spurred into action. These are his thumb screws. And just the news about Konoha alone is enough to make the guy use a flying Raijin to get back to the village. But when he learns about Himawari, he acts urgently. And what we see here is what the 48 Laws of Power discusses in Law number 33, which is that every man has a thumb screw, a weakness that will be their downfall. And for Boruto, that thumb screw is Himawari. The guy was just literally sitting there recovering after spamming flying Raijin several times all day and fighting multiple battles from Code to the Shinju ganging up on him to fighting against Mitsuki, and now the guy doesn't hesitate to teleport back to Konoha. Rightfully so, because his sister is in danger, and so too is his village. That over eagerness to protect his sister, it might lead to his downfall in the future. Now what's interesting here is that back in Konoha, Shikamaru, as he's monitoring Shikadai's battle, he's come to the conclusion that the Shinju, in particular Jura, they aren't mindless brutes that the claw grimes that Code brought to the village were, where they just attacked anything that walked. They were mindlessly seeking out people to consume their chakra. But these evolved Shinju, they're only after specific targets, and based off of what he's seen, he's concerned that Jura only wants Himawari and is not interested in anyone else. And in that respect, he's very similar to Ishiki. Ishiki wanted Kawaki when he came to Konoha, but he wasn't going there to attack anyone. But instead, Ishiki only attacked when he had to retaliate. Jura right now is giving off the same vibe, which is very interesting to say the least. And as he's in the Hokage office, one of the toads appears and tells him not to turn around because obviously Ada is watching, and he's connected to Boruto, who's now back in the village. However, our 8th Hokage, he might have spoken a little bit too soon when he was thinking to himself that Jura won't harm anyone else, because Jura states he's no longer gonna hold back because he is annoyed with the members of Team 10 constantly getting in his way, and we see the terrified look on Himawari's face because that apex predator is finally on the hunt, and she's a cute little fox frozen in fear. Meanwhile, just as Amato finishes remotely waking Kawaki up and boosting him, Kawaki immediately senses a new challenger in the arena, and his mind doesn't go to the Shinju that just whooped his ass, but instead his eyes light up in fury at the one person he's been blinded with for the last 3 years, Boruto Uzumaki. The prodigal son, he's finally returned home and he's taking in the situation. He sees that several Konoha shinobi, they've been killed, while he also gets an update from the toad that's stored away in his cloak. However, before our concerned big brother can fly off to save his little sister, Kawaki appears behind him with Delta serving as backup, and we see Kawaki basically say it's time for them to settle things. But Boruto does the same thing to Kawaki that I do whenever Cody Rhodes cuts a promo on TV. Boruto says, I don't have time for this mess, and what's interesting here is that Kawaki looks annoyed, especially when Boruto tells him, hey man, the village is under attack. Don't you got better things to be doing? And Kawaki's line about Boruto being a threat to the village, being an enemy to the village, it has a deeper meaning. Kawaki's actively seeking out this confrontation with Boruto for other reasons, and he's doing so subconsciously. When you look at it from Kawaki's perspective, this is the second time Boruto has told him that he isn't his priority. The first time it was Code and the Ten Tails, and this time is saving Himawari. What I like about this is that it shows a clear distinction between the two. Kawaki is so blinded by his obsession with Naruto and protecting Naruto and his justified fear that Boruto is a danger to Naruto who needs to be killed. But Boruto, he's calm, he's cool, collected, and focused on the bigger picture. To someone like Kawaki, he'd expect Boruto to be chomping at the bits in order to make him pay for stealing his life and framing him for the murder of Naruto and Hinata. But Boruto not reacting in that way, it is a sign of how much he's matured since Omnipotence, and in particular, how much he's matured since training under Sasuke and Kashi and Koji. This leads us to Boruto dodging Kawaki's sneak attack to shoot out those chakra rods at him, which only serves to further annoy Boruto because fighting Kawaki is not something he wants to do, particularly while Himawari is in danger. Yet Boruto has no choice. Boruto calmly dodges another set of chakra rods shot at him, and despite Kawaki now transforming his arm using ninja tech to fight Boruto, Boruto calmly walks towards Kawaki and then speed blitzes him suddenly before Kawaki can react and sends Kawaki flying backwards with a warning punch, not even a full power punch. And to add insult to injury, Boruto instructs Delta, hey, go patch this dude up and take care of him. I got business to take care of. All while Kawaki is hunched over in a quasi-fetal position, holding his stomach and pissed off that Boruto basically pawned him off to Delta. And to add further insult to injury, Boruto basically says like, hey bro, do you even train? That one punch with Boruto holding back, just a calm punch, it was enough for Kawaki to realize he's got to activate his version 1 karma because he viewed Boruto as being that big of a threat. But by doing so, Boruto's own worst nightmare unfolds. His own karma seal begins to activate. Much like we've seen in the past, Boruto and Kawaki's karma seals have a resonance, and Boruto freaks out and starts grabbing his hand before flying off, and it's because of Momoshiki taking control of his body, which is still a problem. Because there are still people confused, I'm going to keep this very brief. After Momoshiki revived Boruto, Momoshiki only lost the chance to be resurrected using Boruto to be reborn into a new body, the way that Ishiki was reborn after Jigen was killed. As Amato tells us in chapter 69, the threat of Momoshiki hijacking his body, it still exists. In chapter 78, Momoshiki takes over Boruto's body to free Kawaki before Sasuke can kill Kawaki. And Kawaki takes note of the fact that Boruto saw the karma seal cut on, he freaked out and he flew away. Now we then shift back over to Team 10, and now Inojin has managed to save Himawari from another attack, and Shikadai is using the shadow possession jutsu to restrain Jura, but Shikadai makes a mistake of taunting Jura by saying, hey, you can't afford to get distracted because we're your opponents, and Jura just basically picks violence. He closes one Rinnegan eye, and with the other Rinnegan, a small Biju Dama forms right in front of it, and he prepares to shoot it off at Shikadai, which, Jesus, that is cruel when you think about it, because Shikadai's grandfather was killed by a Biju Dama. But Chocho comes in clutch by using the Yang release expansion jutsu to grab hold of Jura and fling him away, but in doing so, the Biju Dama fires off and destroys a chunk of the village, and the shockwaves and the smoke can be seen as far back as the area where Sarda and Class Rep are running to attempt to provide backup, with Shikadai watching as Inojin tries to get Himawari to safety since she's Jura's target, and for good measure, Inojin grabs hold of the members of Team 10 and he attempts to get them out of there because they realize if this fight drags on, then they won't survive long enough for the reinforcements that Shikamaru spoke of to arrive. However, unfortunately for them, Jura, he isn't planning on letting them go, and he gives chase, more annoyed now than ever before. And we get a very brilliant panel where Himawari basically says, these guys are after me, I've got to leave the village. But that leads us to the ending of the chapter, the controversial ending of the chapter, where Himawari suddenly goes into a trance and she's now inside the Biju sanctuary inside of her body, and our precious little Himawari doesn't understand what's happening because for the first time ever, she's experiencing what all Jinchuriki have experienced, that being summoned into that inner sanctuary that all the Biju sealed inside of Jinchuriki share. And we see a miniature version of the Nine Tails standing behind Himawari, and he asks Himawari if she knows who he is, and that's the major cliffhanger that we leave off of the chapter. Now again, this is controversial because from the moment that the Nine Tails was shown inside of her, there were a lot of people that are calling it a plot hole. The other people are saying that it's spit in the face of Kurama sacrifice, so I'm gonna weigh in here. So we see what happens when a Jinchuriki dies, and that's something that the people saying that this is a plot hole that a Biju's getting reborn are forgetting. So we've seen it and we've been told what happens. The fourth Raikage in the fourth Ninja War, when he tried to kill Naruto, said the same thing that Minato and Kushina repeatedly said in Naruto volume 53 around chapter 503, which is that when you kill a Jinchuriki and they got a Biju inside of them, the Biju is eventually reborn at some point later on, which we know to be roughly 3 years, which the Three Tails gives us that timeline. Rin died with the Three Tails inside of her body, and at some point after that, it was respawned and it was resealed into the fourth Mizukage, and he died at some point during Naruto part 1, and 3 years later we see Obito and Deidara capture the fully formed Three Tails, not a baby Three Tails, the fully formed thing. This Nine Tails, it is smaller, despite it having 3 years having passed since Kurama died, and based off of the transition, he doesn't seem to know who Himawari is, and that's a big distinction. It's part of why I don't think it diminishes Kurama's quote death in any way, especially given that Kurama died in the way that he did, and this new Nine Tails doesn't appear to know Himawari. I don't think it disrespects Naruto's sacrifice by losing Kurama, because losing Kurama literally goes back to his character arc in Boruto Naruto Next Generations. The whole struggle of being a father versus being the Hokage, and certain decisions that Naruto made, thinking with his personal feelings, both as a father and as a Jinchuriki, it led to him in a situation where he ultimately faced down Ishiki. He let his past as a Jinchuriki allow him to ignore Shikamaru's advice, his advisor's advice, and he ignored the initial hesitation of the Kage that wanted to have Kawaki kept in surveillance someplace away from the village, which again, in hindsight, we know that's the right call given how strong Kara were and that they were coming for Kawaki. But what happened afterwards is what led to the moment where he paid for his decisions by having to lose Kurama. He heard Amato explain how karma works and how the Otsutsuki come back to life, and he was told that killing Boruto was the only way to stop it, because if they did nothing, Momoshiki would revive, or Ishiki would get his hands on Boruto and feed Boruto to the Ten Tails and produce a chakra fruit, then everybody dies. Naruto did the one thing his predecessors like Hashirama, they wouldn't have done, which is he put his own personal feelings above the village, or in this case, a world-ending threat. He put his own feelings above that. Hashirama literally tells Madara that he would kill his own child if his duty as Hokage called for it. But Naruto, he never considered that option. The same conversation, had he been thinking, the next line would have been, hey, if Ishiki can't revive into Kawaki because Jigen's karma hit 100% karma first, and Kashi and Koji's killing this kid now, why don't we just kill Kawaki right now? And that next course of action should have been to kill Kawaki, because Amato told him Ishiki must never be allowed to resurrect into a body that came from a perfect host like Kawaki. Yet Naruto, a guy who was hunted down as a Jinchuriki, a guy who caught feelings for Kawaki, he couldn't dare take that approach because he was too attached, and it led to having to use Baryon mode to take down Ishiki to protect Naruto's son Boruto and his adopted son Kawaki. Now, having to use Baryon mode, yes, that was inevitable. Needing to use that power to bring down Ishiki, but this gave us the two sides of Naruto at war with each other because he lost that power. He was no longer able to stand up against Momoshiki now. The moment that Boruto's karma hit 100% and Momoshiki would be revived, and the world would be destroyed regardless. If he would have killed Boruto when he was told to, when they interrogated Amato, that wouldn't have been a threat. If he would have killed Kawaki, what happened at the end of Boruto Part 1 wouldn't have happened. Naruto chose his biological son and his adopted son over his duty as Hokage, which that is fine, but it is irresponsible as a Hokage. And even when Boruto was taking those Byakugan drugs, all it did was slow down the inevitable. Eventually, he was gonna have to make a decision to kill Boruto, which Naruto said he would never do. Thus, he was putting the world up to be destroyed, which is why Kawaki basically said, hey, I'm going to kill your son and I'm going to seal you away before you can stop me. Naruto's last action before getting sealed away, it was choosing his son over his duty as Hokage. Naruto stood on his values when he lost Kurama, and it forced his arc to a closure, with his downfall being he was unable to do the logical thing by eliminating his two children, one biological and one adopted. I don't think Kurama's death and Naruto losing Kurama is cheapened at all, given that the info that we have and the fact that Kurama was willing to give up his own life to protect Naruto, someone who he used to hate but he grew to love. It is a poetic ending. Now that this reborn Nine Tails doesn't appear to know who Himawari is and is smaller in size and looks like it's a different Nine Tails, it doesn't cheapen the payoff in any way.